On Insightful Inspiration, Isabelle Landreville chats with a mosaic of brilliant individuals that help shape the insights industry. We live stream episodes to LinkedIn, and you can listen on all major podcast networks. Join us, and please subscribe so you won't miss our guests' insightful inspiration and hear what drives them and how they get inspired to be successful in the insights industry and beyond. Insightful Inspiration is brought to you by Sylvester & Co., an award-winning qualitative research firm with half a century of experience.
Welcome back to episode 10 of Insightful Inspiration, your go-to podcast for discovering secrets to understanding and connecting with diverse audiences. Well, for most of you who know me, you know I've been at this for a few decades now. Sad to say, but true to say, and almost proud of it. But the industry has certainly evolved over the years and has seen quite a few changes, especially recently. Some good, some not so good, some where I'm still on the fence about, and some are right there in the middle. And some of them are, well, it depends how you use it. But the basic need for companies, small and large, to understand their customers remains. I'm your host, Isabelle Landreville, President and Chief Insight Seeker at Sylvester & Co., where we've dedicated to understanding people for 5 decades. I'm thrilled to have a very special guest with us today, Nick Graham, Global Head of Insights and Analytics at Mondelez International, to talk about the role of insights in large organizations. Nick is a recognized leader in our field, keynote speaker at industry conferences, and with over 20 years of experience using data science and human insights, and his love of humans to drive business strategy. Nick is a true strategic partner who has held leadership roles at major companies. I'm so excited about this. I think this is a topic that's really interesting, and I love being a supplier. I really love, and I'm always fascinated because I come in and out, right? When there's a specific need, I get strategic partnerships and I get to see the evolutions of certain things, but I never typically always get a sense of like, what's happening behind the scenes and inside. Yeah. So I'm really excited about this. So
I said to you kind of as we were setting up that, this is such a passion for me. And I started my career on the consulting agency side. And exactly like you were saying, I loved that job. But the bit that I always felt blind on was what's happening on the other side, right? On the client side, on the corporate side. And so through this role and my last role at PepsiCo, it's been a really exciting journey and a real eye-opener about how to drive insights from the thinking, from the output of the work into the organization. So super excited about today's conversation. I'm glad to meet you at last. As you said, we've sort of crossed paths lots of times, but we've not actually met in person. So this is great.
I know. This is great. I've heard your name. You've heard my name. We have a lot of people comment, but now finally.
That's right.
Yeah. And it's so funny because I've been working with your team out in Canada. I'm actually moderating for you guys tomorrow. So anyways, so it's really interesting. Perfect timing. All to say, back to our topic. So let me sort of start off with this question of how is the role and perception of the insight function evolved in large organizations over the recent years?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. I think even in the last 20 years or so, the last 10, 15 years that I've been in corporate life, I have seen a really big change and sort of an accelerating change. And I'd say sort of 3 big areas. I think the first one is really what the sort of role of insights and analytics is within the organization. And that's from the shift from being very much a research data expert, data provider, sort of bringing supplying the research and data and analysis to the organization. To truly being actually a strategic, insightful business leader. So that sort of shift from being sort of an internal delivery of great thinking to actually being a strategic leader in the organization, actually really shaping what does the future look like, what does our category look like, where's our consumer going, backed up by great data, great research, great analytics. So I think that shift, which is a shift for our organization, and we'll come and talk a lot about what that means for different roles within the organization and how our insights and analytics can fit within the sort of broader functional landscape. But I think it's also a shift for insights as well, right? Because it changes how you think about, and it's changed our team, how we think about what success looks like. Success isn't just a great piece of research or a great, insightful piece of analytics. It's actually business impact. So I think that shift in in where our responsibility sort of ends and what our role in the organization has been probably the most fundamental shift. And I wouldn't say we're all the way there by any stretch of the imagination, but I think you really do see that sort of that shift in role over time. So that's kind of one piece. And then I think related to that, there are two sort of how shifts that I've seen. The first one is really sort of related to that, a shift in the type of work that we're doing, and again the type of output that we're delivering. So I think, again, when I started in very much in the sort of descriptive space, so you were describing what had happened. Yes, you were providing recommendations, but it was very much like describing, diagnosing, explaining. And again, I think in that shift in role to being much more of a strategic business partner, I think what we're seeing is a demand from the organization to be much more prescriptive. So sure, tell me what happened in the research, tell me what consumers and shoppers said, but actually tell me what to go and do about it. And actually that's the more important thing. Lead with what do I go and do, and then tell me why, based on the research, based on the analytics, why that is the right answer. So I think that shift from descriptive to prescriptive is a huge change as part of that. And then the last one I would say is, and I think this one is still very much a sort of influx, but I think we are seeing a change in the types of skills that we need within the team. So as we kind of go through this, as I talked about this sort of this arc from research, analytics deliverer, and expertise to being the strategic business partner. So I think one part of it is the need for skills that are much more sort of business consulting, business partnership, strategic thinking skills. On the other hand, I think given the huge proliferation of big data, advanced analytics, we can't have a podcast without talking about artificial intelligence and Gen AI. So just get it out on the table right
now. There you
go. 7 minutes in, I've been 7 whole minutes without talking about it. But, with things like that, I think you've got these two sort of vectors going on. One is the push for insights and analytics to be more strategic, almost sort of sitting above the research and analytics to truly be the business partner. But underneath that, you have an even more even greater need for very specialist, very technical skills, both on the qualitative side and on the quantitative side. So deep specialism in behavioral economics, deep specialism in neuroscience, deep specialisms in advanced analytics and artificial intelligence. So I think this need for specialism at the same time as a sort of general business consulting, I think that's one of our tension points right now, is how we manage the countervailing demands of the business to be really deeper experts, but at the same time, be more sort of business leaders as well.
Yeah. I feel like there's a need for specialty, but also the generalist asset. I don't know about you, but I feel like there's more of a team approach than there used to be.
Yes.
It used to be, so I'm more on the qual side because I only do quals. I don't do quant, but I feel like even on our side, there used to be, you have a good quality, you have that quality, the quality as good as a whole bunch of stuff. But there is this notion of now coming in with a team that has a different expertise, and one might have more of a business acumen, whereas others might be more on the researcher side, on the anthropology side, and so forth. So I think that's kind of interesting as well,
and
which is not something that used to be true 10 years ago.
Right, and I remember, even 5-10 years ago, I had this sort of view of everyone needed to get to this sort of T-shaped shape, I guess, this T-shaped profile. But I actually think what you really need is an ecosystem of people. As you say, you need a more of a team mentality, because you need people who are really deep experts in, as you say, in anthropology, really deep experts in advanced analytics. You cannot and will not get someone who's going to be great at everything. So you need actually someone. You need a team that can bring all of those skills together. And the power, I think, of insights and analytics is when you can bring all of that together with someone probably playing a role in that team to be the connector who sews it all together for the business. I feel like in the past there's often a bit of a hierarchy in those roles, but actually I think more and more we have to respect that we need all of those roles. All of those roles needs different career paths within insights and analytics. They're all incredibly valuable roles. But as you say, the magic will come from those people working together as one unit to deliver the powerful insights to the organization. I think that is, as you say, a bit of a shift from what we've seen in the past.
And so if we shift that, so I feel like there's flatter teams,
Hmm.
probably. Is that the reality or not? But I feel like a flatter team in theory better serves that. But then what happens if you have multiple teams? There's something about hierarchy and always having the same structure that allows you to have different silos and serve greater capacity. What happens when you have experts or specialists and then
Mm.
someone connecting together and try to, do you replicate that? How do you scale that at a large in a large organization? How do you build a team in that, if that's
I
kind of
think
where we're going?
Well, because I think if you think about a lot of the changes I think we're seeing in organizations, not just in insights, but in big corporate organizations, is this more sort of agile ways of working. So rather than this idea, yes, you'll have a defined team because you need a defined team with a manager, with a coach, with the sort of
Mhm.
the skill sets and the people you're going to work with day to day. But I think what we're trying to think of more and more is this idea of sort of agile squad teams that might go and work on a particular project together. But I think everyone just needs to be clear on their roles and responsibilities, what they're bringing to it, who's owning the relationship, say, with the marketing or the sales lead, who's actually responsible for bringing maybe the qualitative research. I mean, it's just the same as we work with our partner agencies as well, which is respecting that. Again, there isn't a one size fits all. You actually want the best of both and be able to bring a group of people together and say, actually, I want you to play this role, I'd like you to play this role, and this person will play sort of the quarterback to bring it all together. So I think it actually can work really well. It's not easy because it's not how people are used to working, but I think ultimately it's the best way to get the best out of the team and to actually allow everyone to be able to contribute and to learn.
Fair. I think it also, from a skill set standpoint, as a human, you have to be really honest with yourself as to these are my strengths, this is my
Yes,
thing,
yeah.
and let me own my thing. I can sort of move into this, grow into this or that, but I do think you have to sort of be honest with yourself and saying, this is my thing and this is not my thing, which
And
might not be easy for everyone.
it's funny. You're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, look, we're human beings, and especially I think for a lot of us, we've grown up in a world of you have to be good at everything, and whenever you go through your performance review, you're only ever listening to the stuff that you're bad at, right? So I think that's a bit of a well, we can come on and talk about that. It's a bit of a curse, I think, of corporate life, which actually isn't helpful because you should really focus on where you can cover your weaknesses, but actually what are you really, really good at and
Yeah.
bring that strength to bear. But I think you're right. I think driving that message and then also helping people recognize that and I think it's worked really well in Mondelez. I think because we have quite a communitarian type of culture, I think it works quite well that people respect the idea that there are different skills, there are different roles that people need to play, and everybody needs to work together in one team to get to the goal because you cannot get there on your own. No individual is going to be able to drive it all through.
Yeah.
But you're right; it is a continuous mental shift that we need to help people with.
Mm-hmm. I just want to come back to something you said when we talked
Hmm.
about the evolution. You said something about, what used to be defining success was more so kind of this notion of, from a supplier standpoint, reporting back, this notion of
Right.
describing and whatnot. And then you mentioned today we're more so moving towards a definition of success that is having a real impact, driving
Hmm.
business impact. Can you expand on that? Can you maybe give me an example or tell me more of what that means?
Sure. I mean, I think the big focus now is coming to the organization with a clear recommendation
Mhm.
and and of course, I mean that's always been our intention, right? As insights professionals, is to come with a recommendation. But I feel like the onus now is even higher on us to say, what does the business need to go and do, as the not just what does the business need to do to respond to consumer feedback, but what actually decisions does the business need to make as a result of this? Some of which will respect the consumer or shopper feedback, some of which it may be contradicted. But again, being able to separate yourself from this is what we have learned to this is what the business needs to do. And
Mhm.
those things are not exactly the same. And I feel like in the past, when we defined ourselves purely as the voice of the consumer, that actually is quite limiting because the voice of the consumer is one input. But I think the role of the insights analytics professional is to take that and to say, okay, so learning from this, what should the business go and do as a result of that? So I think it's elevated and we'll come and talk about some of the, I guess, the sort of the mindsets and skill sets that are required. But I think it's elevated the request of insights and analytics to be able to sit above that and to say, I'm a business leader who is insightful. What does the business need to do to maximize growth, to maximize its profit, to drive revenue? Ultimately, that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to do it in a way that's consumer centric and will be therefore sustainable and will work in the marketplace, as opposed to kind of coming with, well, consumers like this. Well, yes, but yes, and what does that actually mean for the organization? And I think that it sounds like a very subtle shift, but I feel like actually that's quite a distinct role within the organization from how we used to play it.
And I think from the supplier side, we're definitely seeing the difference where sort of reporting back on what seemed to be enough. Now it's so what, and now.
Correct.
Which is kind of three kind of classic sort of hierarchy of. And it's really interesting how I don't need to be, I need to be briefed differently.
Correct.
So I'm sure like the RFPs are longer than ever. The briefings are longer than ever. There's meetings now. There's a request from my team and so forth to actually have a kickoff meeting. Like the starting point is so much more contextual. This notion of what decisions does this research need to empower? How do we define success? Those questions are so much more meaningful and necessary and required these days.
Exactly, and it's funny you say that, because when we did an audit exactly of what it would take to get to this, to truly achieve this role, I think within the organization, the first thing we came to is exactly as the briefing from our stakeholders, briefing to our agency partners. But I think recognizing that often our briefs aren't good enough, right? Our briefs that we get and our briefs that we give aren't good enough, because they often start with, what am I trying to learn? Sure. But actually, I think what we're trying to go is, what decision are we trying to make as an organization? What's the context? What's the business problem that we're trying to solve? And then from what do we need to learn? And I think as insights professionals, and we've gotten so much better at it over the last few years in my team, but again, I think we always have more to learn, is pushing our stakeholders to say, don't come with, I need to do a segmentation. Don't come with a solution. Come with what is, and don't even come with a consumer question. Come with a business question, and then let me help you work out what's the consumer question here. What's the work that we need to do to get there? And sometimes, to be totally honest, our business stakeholders don't know the answer to the question we're asking. Like, so why do you need to do this? What decision are you trying to make? So it's actually a very helpful exercise for everybody to really have that. And it's frustrating because people just want to get on and do, right? Just as, when my team in Canada is briefing you, that like, could we just, like, Isabelle, can we just keep, get going? But actually,
no, they're actually really good.
No, I'm sure they're very good. But, there's always impatience, right? People are always impatient to start moving. But I cannot stress enough the critical importance of getting that briefing right on all sides. Because if you get that briefing right, you know what business problem you're trying to solve, you know what decision is going to be made, you know who the decision maker is. If you don't have a lot of that, what you end up doing is you end up spinning your wheels later and coming back with a report, an outcome, piece of analysis that doesn't really solve what the business asked for, because you didn't know what the business was asking for in the first place.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just 2 or 3 questions, and it's just sort of getting all the key sort of stakeholders or decision makers or the users and whatnot in the same room for maybe just an hour. Sometimes you just need to slow down for an hour and a half so you can think about it.
Exactly.
But then you get greater ROI, because you don't end up doing field work that you don't need to. You don't need. You can sort of scope it better, sharper, and that means go faster. That's also, so sometimes slowing down at the beginning slightly makes you go faster in the end.
And it's interesting. One of the things, we did a big partner day at the beginning of this year, and with some of our key partners. And I think one of the things we talked about, and I tried to empower our agency partners as well, was to say, have the courage to push on us and to ask us questions and say, that isn't clear. Like, I'm not clear what you're trying to solve for. Are you really clear on this? Because I think you and I probably all sat through, and I know I've been guilty of it. Well, let's include that group, or let's include that question just in case we might need it. But I think that belies the fact that if you don't quite know if you'll need it or not, maybe you're not totally clear on what you're really trying to solve for. But the power of this tight brief, a really sharp brief that might seem very limiting, but if you can nail it to a couple of really clear questions, the work is always so much better, because you can go deeper, and your response and your outcome, whether it's a piece of qualitative research, whether it's a piece of analytics, your outcome will be so much more impactful if you really understood what you were solving for.
And your recommendation will make sense.
Correct.
And
Exactly. And be more likely to be taken and be impactful.
Yes, and respected and so forth. And
Exactly.
I think there's a bit of that too. Yeah. And I always believe we don't charge by the slide. And I really do believe in the power of an appendix. A short brief, throw in the appendix. I love it as extra background. I am the firm. Send me all the research you have. I love homework. I love to read. I love context, especially as a quali. However, just if it stays on one slide, one page or two, I think we're good. The sharper the question, the business question, the sharper the outcome, and the more likely we are to understand what it means and what is.
And the same goes for when you get to the outcome as well, right? Which is, the best work I see in our team is when there's one page at the beginning that nails, like, here was your question, here is the answer, or here is the recommendation that comes out of it. Because most of our stakeholders, some of them very detail oriented, but the vast majority, they just want to know what came out of this and what should we go and do about it, because they want to go and take an action on it. Well, probably yesterday, but let's say tomorrow. So they want to go and take action straight away. And so just getting to the point, and that's the old traditional way where it'd be like, and here's the research we did, and here's all the people we talked to, and we did all. It's like, great, sure, put that in the appendix, but just get to the point of, like, I always say, write the ending first. Like, go to, like, what's the outcome of all of this? What should we go and do? And then go back and back up your story. So I do think, again, and that whole storytelling with an eye to who is your stakeholder, who is your audience. That is such a critical skill for how insights leaders, I think, in big organizations like ours can be successful, is by just going, okay, so I'm giving this, I remember I was looking at something the other day. We're giving this presentation to one of our senior commercial leaders who's like, has 10 minutes for any meeting, very clear what they want, like no messing around, like just want the straight answer. And so the debrief you would write for her would be very straightforward, very clear. If you can get it on one page of like, boom, 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 this is what we want to go and do, the better. There are others who want a bit more storytelling. They want, some of my brand leaders, unsurprisingly, very emotionally engaged with our consumers. So they want the videos, they want the storytelling, but being able to pivot and really understand the difference of the story you need to tell. It's not like storytelling isn't a generic thing; it's specific to the audience that you're trying to impact.
You got to be, so without creating bias, because we have to, there's something about finding the meaningful story that's going to back up the insight to get the everybody moving in the right direction based on what the consumer insights are or the human insights are. It's not just storytelling. It's storytelling for impact, for ROI, to empower people to know, So
to inspire people. Ultimately, insight to me is, because you can imagine about 5 times a day somebody asks, like, what is a great insight? But to me, that illuminating moment is great, but it has to inspire people to act, because if it's not, then it's not insightful, because there's no oomph to make you do something.
And it needs to be embraced. And I think that's where the power of the story comes through. It needs to make sense. It needs to feel right to people. So there's an insight, but then that's the empathy part. You need to empathize with the insight almost up to a certain point. I love it when people go back and, just to name a name, and they go, John, remember would John be okay with this? Who John was the ambassador of blah, blah, blah serve story. And he's like, and later on in meetings, I go back in meetings and they go, would John like this? I'm like, well, let's talk about that. And I think that's success in.
Right. And I think it's often hard for us, because I think we see, as students of human behavior, many of us, right, or even students of data, you see the complexity, we see the nuance, we see the fact that it isn't clear cut usually, right? There's always gray, whether you're doing qualitative research or you're doing a piece of advanced analytics. Of course, there's never going to be totally clear cut, but part of our job needs to be to separate between obviously you don't want to give an overly biased view, but you do have to take a stand. You do have to have a point of view about what it tells you. And maybe there's like the Supreme Court, there'll be a minority opinion, which will be a bit different because there'll be somebody you spoke to, or there'll be a data set that tells a slightly different story. But at some point, the role of the insights professional in big corporate organizations has to be to synthesize that and to have the courage to say, yes, it's complex. Yes, there's nuance, but this is what we need to go and do. And this is why I believe, based on all of the evidence, that this is the right path.
Yeah.
And again, that's going back to where we started. I think that's a mental shift for the organization and for many of our teams, is that, and I think some of them embrace that totally, is that I need you to start with your informed opinion, because it is, it's informed by the incredible expertise and the incredible, insight that you've got. But you need to come with that, and then tell the story of why you believe that's the right perspective, and sometimes have the courage to take a leap of faith, because again, we all know the data whatever the data is won't tell you all of the answers. You need to apply your interpretation, your understanding of the consumer, the category, the business, to then take it to that next level.
And I mean, we're very complex. So to boil it down,
yes, all right.
We're never going to stop.
Newsflash. Human beings are complex, right?
And that's never going to change.
Right. I'm pretty sure of that. I'm pretty sure. Unless maybe AI, Gen AI will solve all of that, Isabelle. We know that.
I'm not sure about that one. Maybe, or maybe it's.
I think it might just create more complexity. But
yeah, that's what I'm thinking. But I think that's a sure bet. But I think one of the questions I've started asking in the recent years as well, and I'd love to sort of hear you on this, but when I get briefed and the decision, because context matters, because to have a POV and to build a meaningful story that's going to inspire people, as we've been talking and so forth, to be successful in a world, you need a POV, you need context. Otherwise, you can't make a call, right? You can't you can't take a stand without context. But I've been also asking, how do you like to learn, or how does your team like to learn? Because we have visual learners, you have sensorial learners. Like, it's really interesting. So I've started asking that question.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think, we did a really good session with our insights team, training session on insights to impact. And a big part of that was about understanding your stakeholders and how they receive information. And almost like, as you say, our stakeholders are complex, just as human beings are complex, and there's no one size fits all. But spending the time to go, my boss, Martin, learns in a certain way, he likes that he's very visual. So knowing that, if I'm writing a presentation that's designed to impact him and to get him to act, I will think about that differently than maybe my finance counterparts. My finance counterparts will just like show me the data tables, because there's a level of, I need to see below. If I just go to them with a nice visual thing, it's like, here's the story that I get, great, show me the data table. So being able to pivot that and understand your audience, and as you say, go, how do you learn? How do you absorb information? I think is really, really important. And I think it's one of them, when I see, some of my insights leaders, when I see them be successful, it's because they've got a deep relationship with that stakeholder. And I think building that relationship is a critically important part of how they are influential in the organization. But through that, they've learned that, Ben has a very specific way he likes to see it. And so that really helps them be impactful, because they know the audience that they're delivering against.
Yeah, I think it takes empathy to build empathy, and also to teach empathy, and to sort of, socialize empathy. It's
we talk a lot about empathy externally, right? Like, we talk about having empathy for our consumer, empathy for our shopper. We talk about designing communication and innovation that speaks to what they need. And so I think as an insights organization, we can be incredibly empathetic externally. But one of the things we talked about through this insights to impact training was actually applying that internally to say, well, we can apply those same skills, those same mindset to our internal audiences. So if we want to be impactful, it isn't just about saying, I need a seat at the table, I need you to listen to me. It's actually about thinking about, how do I most effectively influence this person based on what I know about how they make decisions? What's, what's stressing them, what keeps them up at night, what do they care about, like
Mhm.
all of that. If you can apply that, it sounds Machiavellian, but it's not. It's just a smart way to ensure that your work lands in the organization.
And so let me play devil's advocate a bit, because I feel
Yeah.
like, or is it devil's advocate? You tell me, but or challenge you on something. I'm curious to know, because if the role of insight, I feel like listening to you, the role of insight, and even on the supply side, our role is more complex, bigger, greater because of the need of context.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing a whole bunch of meetings you need to be sitting in on, listening into, a whole bunch of stuff you need to read, and a whole bunch, like, just to make sure you're attuned to the context and really have
Yeah.
a hold on it. Is that the reality in large organizations? Like, how do you set boundaries? How do you make it work, given the need for context is greater today?
So I think the way that we've talked about it is, again, if you think about, there are different roles in our team. So the business partner role, that is, and you need to love doing that, but that is what your role is, right? Like it's being in meetings, it's building relationships with stakeholders, it's understanding the broader context of how the business makes money, what's happening in the organization right now. So I think if you love those dynamics, and again, the most successful people I see, maybe they may have come from insights, they may have come from somewhere else, but they're passionate about the organization and the business, and then they're just inherently insightful. But they may not be a deep methodological expert. I don't necessarily need the business partners to be always deep methodological experts, because we obviously have great partners, we have great people in the team who can play that role. It kind of goes back to your idea of this sort of, the team and the ecosystem is, you need to be able to free up some people in the team to truly be business partners and to be able to spend that time in the meetings, in the category leadership meetings, but you also need to be able to then free up different people to be focused on because you can't expect that business partner to also know what's happening in AI and advanced analytics and what's happening in anthropology. So I think where we've gone wrong as an industry sometimes is expecting those people to be able to do everything, and they can't. But I think if you can accept that there are different horses for different courses and different roles that you want them to play, then I think you can really help maximize the power of the team. If you say, I don't need to do everything, I'm gonna be the business expert, you be the methodological expert. Together, that's what makes it unstoppable, because you're able to deliver work that's incredible, and then I can deliver it into the organization.
Yeah.
But I mean, look, being honest, it's hard because, insights analytics, when you operate across at least the entire commercial organization, right? Marketing, sales, finance, strategy. So it always does feel a bit like um, a bit like dodgeball, right? But except it's a team, a very small team on one side and a very big team on the other side,
Yeah.
and you're constantly trying to battle the fact that there's so many different stakeholders. So again, I think it's not, you need to pick your battles. You need to work out who are the people I really need to engage with, which are the meetings I need to be in, which I can't. Like, you obviously can't be in absolutely everything. But I think if you find, again, when I look at some of our really successful insights leaders in our organization, I think what they're good at as well is they find really good partners. They'll find a really good partner in finance. They'll find a really good partner in strategy. So they don't always need to be everywhere, because they have eyes and ears in finance. They have an eye and ear in strategy. So they have somebody who can help them navigate, oh, I heard that this thing was happening. How does this connect to this? As opposed to them always having to be at the forefront. But even that obviously takes time and energy to make that happen.
Yeah. I feel, is there more expected, more asked of the insight functions than there was?
I mean, yes, and I think my team would say yes, completely. And I think, as I said, I feel like it's true across lots of dimensions, because I think they're asked to, exactly as you said, they're asked to be more contextual and more holistic than ever before, and at the same time asked about, particularly with the proliferation of things like first-party data, AI, etc. They're asked all of this in-housing of methodologies. That's all of this sort of more technical piece as well. I think that's where I felt like a tipping point in the last few years has been the sort of overload of our insights leaders, is that they're being asked to be, again, like business experts and sort of technical experts all at the same time. And I think that was the light bulb for me of well, no, we don't actually need that. What we need is people who can do one or the other, and then that they can work really well together in a team to help support each other. But I think yeah, it's definitely true that there's, continuing pressure and push on the team
Mhm.
to continue to elevate our thinking and push it further forward.
Yeah. Is there something when it comes to strategic partnership, whether
Hmm.
internally or externally, is there some I'm hearing you, it's moved from, technical and business acumen to in one person to maybe having two or three people actually.
Right.
But I'm getting the sense from what you're saying that it's still in-house. But is it? Are you from external partnerships, are your expectations changing? Are you structuring their strategic partnerships internally, externally differently as
That's
a
a great,
result?
yeah. No, that's a great question. And I think what you're absolutely right is if you apply that same mentality of it's a team sport now more than ever because you need
I
a
love that. Sorry, I love that. It's a team sports now.
of
It
course it
never
is.
was. Now it
Yeah.
is.
I mean, I think he was always sort of, but I think it's so to me it's so blatantly obvious now that it has to be a team sport
Yeah, I feel like it's a
because the
must now.
demands are. But you're
Sorry,
absolutely
I
right.
love
And
thinking about it that way. Sorry, I totally cut you off, but I love
no,
that.
no, no, no,
The
no,
thought
no.
came up.
I'm glad you're excited by it because I agree. I mean, I think it's so critical. But I think you're absolutely right. So what we said is we need to think about the ecosystem of our partners around us. Sometimes there are things that our partners are doing that we could do because there are, either it's more efficient or there's something that we can bring to that. But equally, there'll always be. I think we need to think about it as this sort of hybrid ecosystem. So really thinking about it as there are going to be things that the Mondelez INA team are going to do, again, split across different roles and teams. Some of that might in-house things that are happening externally. Some of it might not,
Mhm.
and some of it we might say we're doing now, but we want an external partner to help us. So I think it really we have to think about it as truly this sort of hybridized ecosystem where it doesn't all have to happen in-house. It doesn't have to happen out of house, as it were, or
Yeah.
externally. It's going to be a bit of a blurred lines. I mean, we were talking about this when we were looking at one of the biggest challenges I have right now is that more and more of the work that we're doing requires multiple different data sets, right? So whether it's qualitative research plus it's Nielsen
Yeah.
IQ data, or it's maybe Nielsen IQ data and Euromonitor data, but it's inherently multi-source in terms of the work they're doing, because that's where the magic is. If I can combine together and connect
Mhm.
together, even if not literally, different data sets, then I can get to a more powerful insight. However, one of the things we said is one of the challenges in that, of course, is then that work can only be done in-house because obviously I can't ask, Nielsen IQ to work on Euromonitor data. That's not appropriate, or vice versa. But one of the things we had when we had our agency partner day, one of the really exciting things that started to come out of that from the folks that were there was people coming up to me say, actually, there is a way around this where we can create working groups across our teams, across partners,
Mhm.
between qualitative suppliers and quantitative suppliers,
Mhm.
across quantitative suppliers, even sometimes that are competing. We can create working groups where we can create the privacy and the structures to allow us to work on that. So that doesn't all have to sit in-house. Some of that can be done by our external partners in the right way. So I think I'm so excited about this because this forces us to break down those very sort of structured
Yeah.
binary silos that exist internally, externally today, and just go,
Mhm.
actually, why couldn't we think about a different structure and a different way of
And
operating?
I think if you build a team, like a task force or a unit
Yeah,
or whatever you wanna name it, but even with your external partners, either they compete one another against one another, either they are complementary. But I think there's something I'm listening to you, I think I've done it in the past, um, and I'm still gonna probably do it. There's something really exciting about it because
yeah,
if it's well done and if it's set up as to you are brought in with this purpose, this is your
right,
superpower, this is your role, this is your expertise, and then the other, and then so forth, and this is why we want to bring you together to connect the dots in this way.
yeah,
You literally, everybody kind of lets their hair down, there's no competition, and it becomes like a think tank. It becomes
yeah,
really exciting, like an incubator of basically rock stars being at their best and just everybody's got their superhero cape on and they're just at their best. There's no
Beautifully put.
competition, there's
Beautifully
nothing,
put.
but you have to set it up properly.
You're right.
Otherwise, they're going to be self-conscious. They're going to be like, humans are humans, right? They're going to be
Completely, and we
Like-
basically created that, right? Because we told them to compete with one another.
Yeah.
And so then when you say, I'm going to bring you together, inherently there's going to be competition. But you couldn't have nailed it better, which is, again, coming out of the partner days we had in January, the biggest ask actually from a lot of our partners was like, yes, we want to work like this. Our one ask in return is just tell us, partner A, this is your job. This is your superpower. This is why we are hiring you for this. And partner B, this is why you're also part of this, because you're going to bring this different expertise. And actually, although that's sort of against all of the traditional ways of working, actually people are like, no, that's super liberating, because then I don't have to worry about, you need me to do this thing, or I need to fight for this thing. You've been very clear. Partner B is going to do this, partner A is going to do this. I need you to work together. And everyone's like, no, this is can be really exciting. And we see it, I mean, and across some of our partners, incredibly great examples where the roles and responsibilities are clear and distinct. The harder thing is when they're, either competing or they're much closer. But I think it can be done if it just takes the bravery, the courage, also for the client to say, I need you to work together, and I'm going to tell you what role I want you to play. But 99 times out of 100, what I've found is people are just very grateful. And then, as you say, they can be brilliant at the thing that they're really good at.
And as a supplier, you always get a sense of what you're good at and why they keep getting you, coming back to you and so forth. But you never really truly, there's something very fabulous about knowing where you stand as a human, as someone who's part of a team, because we all get out of bed with the very best intentions of helping, of doing our best work, of having an impact. And if you actually lose that sort of competition and make it clear, then and I'm just, it's really funny because it's the team I've built. I'm talking about my corporate culture. Because in a world of qualities where they're all, they're all profit centers, they could all compete, that there's no competition at Sylvester because there's always a team. And then there's also the fact that if you work as a team and come in as a team, not only is it better, but also people can go on vacation, which in the quality world wasn't really a reality. Quality of life.
Exactly. No vacation,
really
no evenings.
Everybody literally has a superhero at Sylvester, and it can evolve, but it's overarching and it builds as a bigger team. And their responsibility and a portion of their KPIs every year is to nourish that superhero, to make sure that their cape is never at the dry cleaners and always ready to go at the service of other people. So it's really nice because if they have a question and they need help, they know where to go.
And I love that. And I think that's the metaphor for insights organizations probably generally, but insights organizations across the board. That's exactly going back to that team dynamic we talked about. Is that I think that's the way you get the best out of it, which is you say, your superpower is the business partnership. Your superpower is you're brilliant at marketing mix modeling and advanced analytics. Be brilliant at that, but work together. By making people feel they're not failing because they're good at one thing and maybe they're not good at analytics.
Yeah.
But they don't need to be. You just need to free them to be fantastic at their superpower, and then coach them and mentor them to help work together with other people and trust and rely on other people in the organization.
Trust is a big one. We could do a whole episode on trust.
Yes, I'm
but
sure.
I think they also have to be really good at their thing, but also really good at working with the others. I think that's you always need to be good at working with others. That's a given now.
That is a bit of, Well, that goes to the new model has to be like that, right?
That needs to be your second expertise. There's an area of specialization.
It's just a fundamental one that has to be on the bottom, right?
If you want to play with others.
Yes, if you don't want to play with others, there's lots of solo consultancies you can go and set up.
Exactly. Okay, I just want to be mindful of your time. I swear, we could go on we should do again. I think we have to be mindful, but let me ask you, what is exciting you about the future?
So I'll say, overall, the thing that excites me, and through all this conversation, is people. I feel like every year when I go to a conference, there's a sort of is this the end of insights, right? Whatever it is, whatever thing happened, and obviously now it's AI, Gen AI, the thing we're not allowed to talk about, but it's always like, oh, it's the end, and it's gonna. And actually, I never felt more confident that there's such an important critical role for insights, and there always will be. I mean, you said it in your introduction, right? As long as there are companies trying to market, sell, reach consumers and shoppers, there will be a need for insights. It might look different, but there will always be a critical need for our roles.
Yeah.
And if anything, never more so than now, because of the speed of change, the fact that the future doesn't look like the past, the fact that human behavior is so complex and dynamic. So the ability to have a group in your organization that is thinking about the bigger picture, is thinking about the context, is understanding where your consumer and shopper is going, and is helping guide the business on the right decisions to make for the short and long term. To me, that is without a shadow of a doubt a critical role that will always exist.
Yeah.
What I think I'm excited about, I'm going to talk about Gen AI very briefly, but I'm excited because
I'm
I
excited
think
about it. I use it all the time.
me
Not
too.
for
Me too.
Not for analysis, though.
Not for analysis. No.
Yeah.
But I do use it at least in my personal life, and we are piloting it a lot within our organization, in obviously with all of the safety protocols we need to put in place.
Yeah.
But what I'm excited about is for two reasons. One is because I think, let's be honest, there's still a ton of stuff in our industry that is exceptionally manual, that AI, Gen AI can help us automate, simplify, streamline, give us a start point. So whether it is, and I've seen a lot of the diagnostic stuff, the descriptive stuff, for example, every week as an organization, we have to here's what's happening from a share performance, here's happening with the category. Somebody still sits and writes some of that, but increasingly we're getting AI to write that, at least to write the first draft, because that saves a huge amount of human capital, human time. Yep. And then obviously that human time can be pivoted to other things, to things where I do need people to be able to, where I need that human intelligence. So I'm really excited about the time efficiency, but I'm also excited because I think, and we've been looking at this recently with some of our trends work, is the ability of AI and Gen AI overlays to help us spot things that no human could spot or not spot easily. So I think there's an efficiency element, which is saving time and energy. But I also do believe there's sort of there's a quality effectiveness piece, which is, I think, deployed in the right way, it has to be trained. Obviously, it's not, you can't just switch it on and hope for the best.
No.
But I think there'll almost be a whole future set of roles within our teams of essentially LLM trainers who are spending their time training models. They won't replace insights. It won't replace some of our roles, but there will be an incremental role, I think, within our teams, which is teaching those models to help, again, to spot things that we can't see in the mass of data, and at least to give a start point for a human analyst to be able to come in and say, this is a really interesting thing. Do I think it's right? Do I not? Do I want to go and explore it? But again, because we're just going to be sitting on this, tsunami of data, it's not going to be possible for a human being to be able to work their way through it. But if the AI, Gen AI can sit between it and help filter that to, here's the 3 signals I need to go and look at, then human intelligence can really come to the fore.
Yeah, I think it can definitely help in briefing and sort of figuring out where you need to, which tree you need to bark up, to quote a friend.
Exactly.
There's something about you are not starting from scratch anymore.
Yes. Yeah. Completely.
The white page no longer exists. The 7 bad ideas you're going to get no longer have to take 2 hours to get to. There's a lot of, it's a great productivity tool. I think it's a great creativity tool. I think in my world, I'm finding it, I'm looking at, because I'm a quality and a moderator, I think there's the social aspect of it. I think it's interesting to be, it's not moderating, it's not probing, that's not what I'm saying, but I'm using it as a tool to create safety with people. And so they get to interact with it with sort of within the context of a group discussion online, in person, and whatnot. And it creates a lot of safety depending on the topic, depending on what it is. Quick example for 5 seconds. Gen Z, the classic projective technique of brand personification. Do not do that with Gen Z. It doesn't happen anymore. It can't happen, especially not in a focus group, live or in virtual. They won't play into stereotypes. It's just, it works against every fiber of their being. And they will, I've heard it. I'm afraid of being canceled. I'm like, no one knows your name. No one's following. Can't do it. And so if you use AI, then they course correct AI. So AI is using
Yes,
stereotypes and they course correct it. And then you can sort of use projective techniques in a very interesting way. And you get deeper, richer answers and insights
that's
coming out
great.
of it. So you
Yeah,
can
no, that's a
have
great example.
safety as well in that sense. So you just have to be creative about it. It's a tool.
I
It's another
agree.
tool in our toolbox.
It's a tool like anything else, and I think
Yeah.
deployed correctly, it can be incredibly powerful too. I mean, that's a great example. I hadn't thought about that, but I think you're absolutely right. There's a productivity, but I think there is a creativity element to it, and I
Mhm.
think it can help us solve or find new solutions to things that we're struggling with right now. But again, it is just a tool. At the end of the day, it doesn't obviate the fact that our role is to understand human behavior, to be able to shape it, obviously, at least from my organization, to shape it to help us grow.
Mhm.
That still requires a deep understanding of human behavior, which isn't always logical, doesn't follow a simple code, isn't always predictable. And so I
Mhm.
think it's a cliche, but the AI with the HI, with the human intelligence, that
Yeah.
will always be so critical. But I think we shouldn't be scared of AI. We should lean in and say, how can I utilize this smartly, safely to
Mhm.
help me do my job even better in
Yeah.
future? And the reality is, again, the people who say, well, we can do without it. It's like the huge amount of data just in a qualitative piece of qualitative research. There's so much data that you may never even get to, right?
Yeah.
Because of the speed that you have to move at, because we're human beings. But if you
Mhm.
could apply an AI overlay to that, and maybe there's 10% more you can extract from that, who knows? That could be the 10% that unlocks something you didn't see.
Yeah.
So I think it's a huge opportunity. We're only really just scratching the surface.
Yeah. I think it's from the get-go, what I'm finding is that it's a great tool for more seasoned folks,
Yeah.
more so than for junior folks, because we know either we're better at briefing, better at delegating. Not everybody's a good delegator because that's what prompting is.
Yeah.
Not everybody is good at structuring and sort of doing that. And I think the other thing is you got to know what success looks like to be able to gauge an answer and see if this makes sense or not.
Agreed. Right. I mean, that's
Yeah.
where you need to use it kind of smartly, is because
Mhm.
you need to be, that's why you still need the human intelligence layer on top, because, and again, there are obviously concerns about, we know there's concerns about bias, right? That we know there's
Mhm.
concerns that it will largely spit out what it already knows and what you've trained it on.
Yeah.
And so if you haven't trained it properly, if you haven't prompted it properly, so that's what I mean, is it's a whole art and science that we're going to have to learn as an industry about how to use large language models in the right way.
Mhm.
But I think it's a really exciting chapter. And again, from this, I think can come huge savings in efficiency, but again, huge opportunities in terms of spotting things, finding things we can't see today.
And I think it's going to allow us to save time to actually be able to focus on the context, focus on the impact,
Yes. Yeah.
focus on the
Yeah.
business aspect and the storytelling and whatnot, which is what the human sort of aspect is really important. That's where the human
Right. I mean,
really.
somebody once said to me, like, if you think about a piece of research, a piece of analysis as a curve, we still spend a lot of our time in the middle of the curve, which is basically the doing bit. It's like it's
Mhm.
setting up the field work, it's running the research, it's doing, but we don't spend enough time on the edges. And the edges are the briefing, which we talked about, and then the debriefing, and the debriefing and landing it into the organization,
Yeah.
truly making an impact. And what I'm excited about is if we can sort of squish the curve a little bit. I feel like we're going back to COVID days now about suppressing the curve. But if you can push the curve
Yeah.
down and push up some more time and space at the
Mhm.
front and the end of the process, actually we can deliver better quality insights, hopefully
Yeah.
faster and more efficiently and more impactfully, because we'll
Mhm.
understand the context and we'll be able to
Yeah.
have time to land it into the
And
organization.
I
To me,
think
that's a triple win.
do you believe that I'm a strong believer, and I've even given a talk on it. I'm a strong believer that your debrief will only be as good as impactful as your briefing is. Don't
100.
expect a good, you
Yes.
can make up for it as much as you can. I feel
Yes.
like spend more time. I would even say spend more time on the briefing in order to make sure your debrief is okay.
Well, it goes back to what we said, right? Is
Yeah.
sort of an hour saved at the beginning is usually 6 hours lost at the end,
Yeah.
because it's it's that first debrief you have, which sort of goes a bit flat because you didn't quite nail what the original problem was. So I 100%, if there was any way I was going to be able to spend more time, and again, if what AI can do is speed up and make more efficient the setup phase, if you like, and setup and the running of the research or the analytics, then we should be able to spend more time up front to be able to say, before I go and prompt this thing or before I go and run this piece of research, really sweating what are we solving for, so that you're right, then the rest of it will be so much better and so much more impactful.
And if you know what you're truly solving for from a qual standpoint, maybe you don't need those extra 3 groups, and maybe you don't need 5 markets, you only need 2, which actually uses the time without taking the human aspect out of it, without the depth, which is
agreed. 100% agree. It's the power of the
there's something there.
It's the power of the tight brief, right? I mean, whether it's to a creative agency, to a research or analytics agency, if you can be really sharp and tight on the brief, usually, I mean, you've got to watch for bias and make sure that you're not just like being too blindsided.
Of course.
But usually the work will be even better because it was so much more focused. And to your point, instead of doing those extra 3 groups, you can spend an extra hour because you really wanted to really understand a particular issue. I mean, can't tell you, I mean, you know this, right? Like how many times you look through a qualitative research discussion guide and it's like 5,000 questions, 4,999 of which you'll never be able to get to. But like, what is the key question? What are the key things you're trying to get to? If you can just focus on that, that will be so much more impactful.
Yeah. And I love a good research question, because if I have a good research on top of the business, a good research question, I know what to do with that. I know it takes you 2 questions or 7 questions or maybe 3, but I know that if that door is opening up in a conversation, I can use that question. If that door is open, I can use that question. Then like it sets me free, to do my best work, which I think is amazing.
I always used to, when I was a qualitative moderator, I always used to frustrate my clients because I would always go, because there would be the discussion guide that I would write to keep them happy. And then on top of that...
Don't say that out loud, Nick.
My closest clients, they did know that. But then I would always basically write myself each section, like, here's the real question I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
And then I would sort of ask around that and prompt around that, because yes, to me, the set of questions are there to help make sure that the client feels comfortable that you're getting to it, but it's not a list of questions. It's some prompts in your mind to remind you of the direction you need to get to. You have to have the ability to be able to pivot and follow where the conversation is going.
I think on top of AI, I think the thing that's kind of exciting as well, and I don't know if it is the fact that we've moved away from consumer insights. We have shopper insight, consumer insight, to human insight.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of the same. It's like the other buzzword but I think because we want things faster, leaner, AI, automation, tech, research tech being a huge part of what we do now, and what's offered in the marketplace, I think I like having the word human there. I think it's still people.
Of course, completely.
Complex people, we're not forgetting that they're people like us, which I think is kind of interesting. If that is what it does.
You're blowing my mind now, Isabelle. Wait, what? People are complex and consumers are just like us? I don't know. I don't know where these crazy ideas are coming from.
I know.
Friday afternoon. No. But you're absolutely right. And the only danger I've seen in that is that sometimes the risk is then almost the context becomes so overwhelming. And again, when you're doing a piece of research, it's like, well, where do I stop? Because you're absolutely right. Like, of course, maybe I'm talking to a consumer around chocolate, but of course, that's one small part of their lives. So as long as you pair that with exactly what we just talked about, which is a really clear view of what the business question, the research question is you have, then absolutely put it in context, but just be careful that have to be careful that you don't boil the ocean as well. So do you know what I mean? You've just got to find that right balance between the two. But the research I've seen that's most exciting is when, again, you have a very clear research question, but through that, it's that sort of serendipitous moment when you discover something about, I don't know, I'm thinking about some stuff we did recently about, we were asking about consumption behavior, but actually shopping behavior came up through that, which actually it was clear was a really interesting unlock around how people buy how people buy chewing gum. And so we were talking about consumption, but actually you kind of really get to the shopping behavior was probably really the problem. So sometimes I like it when you sort of stumble across that by forcing ourselves to think of context. But to me, that's where it comes back to the brief. If you do a really good briefing, then you can really push on that and say, well, have we thought about the shopping the situation? Like, is that potentially the real problem here, not the consumption problem?
Yeah. And I love it when someone, so to build on that, fully agree with you. I think to build on that, there's also the fact that when you're fielding, also embrace the journey that with each touch point or consumer touch point shop, like each respondent or participant touch point, you keep learning. But at one point, don't be afraid to pivot or maybe to stop and redesign. I remember doing for Cadbury Adams, I'm just going to tell you my age, but at that point, but there is a moment in innovation in a concept. We were in New York and someone actually said, hey, that's not, and the pin dropped for everybody. And they said, we need to stop. We need to stop fielding. We need to take it back. We need to pivot. We need to act on this right away and then go again. And to have that freedom and that ability and that awareness or that team to be able to do that, not just blindly keep going, I think is amazing. And that's also, I think, going back to courage, which is one word we've been using, I think we need a bit of courage as insight people.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. And we talked about it's as a team, we talked about 3 values, which is clarity, which is that whole like being really clear on what the problem is, courage, and the courage, as you say, courage to say no, courage to say what's completely the wrong question. This is really the issue, or this is what we need to go and do. And then connection, right? Which again is going back to that idea of connecting. But you're absolutely right. We did some really good work recently around packaging for Oreo cookies in Latin America. And what I really loved about that is, I mean, it took me back to one of my favorite experiences when I was at Pepsi, which is we did truly iterative innovation development. Like day one was spending time with consumers, really understanding their packaging experiences. The second day was actually designing with the designers and the innovation folks in the room, developing prototypes. Then you went back to consumers, you stress tested them, you could realize we're completely in the wrong direction. So this, again, I think if we can get away from this very overly structured, very linear way of doing work and actually go, again, it goes back to the idea of that connective iterative approach. I think we can get so much further faster. But that to me was like, yes, this is how we need to be doing innovation work, is in this much more sort of back and forth, like showing you something, testing something. Oh no, that's completely failed to hit the nail on the head, and then being able to go back to the drawing board. And that allows you to have the courage, but also because you have the whole team there, you can actually maximize the power of having. Insight comes from everywhere, right? It doesn't just come from people who have insight in their title. It comes from R&D. It comes from finance. Comes from supply chain. It comes from the entire organization. And actually having those people in the room, you're like, oh wow, this really gets us to a much better place.
Well, you don't have to convince anybody. No one's second guessing. They were there. There's something about experiencing it firsthand. I'm like, what's the life experience? And sometimes I've asked that. What is the life experience you want?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, sometimes it hurts. I sent crying babies to ad agency girls that didn't have babies that were about to cater to. I think one to this day has yet to have a kid. It's a life experience. You learn from it. That's how you.
No, but that's it, right? If you, again, to your point, if you want to truly empathize, you have to sort of sit in the shoes a little bit more. And even I think, well, you can. My favorite qualitative research experiences, are where you're actually in the room with the consumer, not behind the glass mirror in a sort of really artificial environment, where you can, you can be part of the discussion. You can prompt, like it's, again, it's going to, it differs on terms of what you're trying to achieve, but I think those can often be much more productive, and to your point, for the client folks and the agency teams, can often be much more experiential and like sustaining memories that they have, as opposed to how many times you just sat behind a two-way mirror, a one-way mirror, and you're like, this is not the most fun experience.
You remember what was for dinner and how you felt about that, probably more
Yes.
so. That is the one question I get asked the most. What's for dinner? But backroom chicken. No, but I try to stay away from that. But I think you build collective memories.
Yes.
Through field work.
And it's back to your point about how do you influence that? That to me was always a really good way. I mean, again, not on every project, but on some projects that are really critical that your people are there in person. That's your best way of driving inputs, because everybody was there. Everybody has a collective experience. People might have different perspectives about what they heard, which is good. I mean, that's part of what you're trying to get. But you have a collective experience, and there's something incredibly powerful about them bringing that back into the organization, because it's not you as an insights leader trying to inspire people and educate people about what you learned. You have a whole cadre of people who can be there as the advocates. But no, that's not what, as you say, that's not what John said in that research session. This is what I heard.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, Nick, we could clearly go on and on.
We could. We've obviously got like 30 years of experience and perspective.
I think we have 40 years between the two of us experiencing this. So to anybody listening, they always know. So I'm bicultural. Anyways, there's a lot of French of me, and so because I ask questions for a living, I really like I hand selected 4 of my favorite questions from Bernard Pivot's Bouillon Culture, which actually you might know from James Lipton back in the day, who actually had that ended every actor studio with 10 questions. They are the same questions. I just have the French he actually borrowed them from. So initially they were French. Anywho, all to say, I'm not going to ask you your favorite swear word online, so don't worry about that one. But I think just in the spirit of sparking inspiration, aside from our conversation, I really like asking these 4. So here goes. Ready to play?
Okay, I'm ready to play.
Okay, first question. What other profession than your own would you like to attempt?
I always wanted to be an architect.
Why is that? What's the appeal in that?
I think it's because it's a combination of art and science, right? There's an aesthetic element to it, obviously, but there's a whole engineering piece and how you make it. And I just think the designing of a structure, thinking about how it's going to work together, the flow of it, like there's just so many elements to it. And I think for me, always what fascinated me was, how is someone going to live in that space? And so you're designing for aesthetics, you're designing for engineering, but you're also designing for people's life in it, right? Like how many times, you stay in an Airbnb and you're like, well, why would you put this over here? Because like, this doesn't make sense. I mean, this isn't how you would flow through a room. So to me, it was just fascinating. And the unfortunate thing was I was really bad at math and physics and engineering, so that didn't really work out. But in theory, that would be what I would have done.
Yeah, and in theory, you're selling me on it. It sounds really good.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds good, right? I mean,
it sounds really good. Yeah,
my storytelling is good, so I would have succeeded.
And the visual aspect, like it's like, there's something about, like I presented a report this morning. Someone said, "Ooh, I love that." I'm like, "Oh, good. It looks good, and hopefully it's insightful." Like there's something about.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it goes back to what we talked about in terms of presentation. Presentation is everything. At least 50% of your message, right? Like how many times I've done a presentation where the content is absolutely spot on, but the presentation for some reason didn't land with people because they were very visual thinker and they needed to see it differently. But to me, like, it's just so important that you pair those two together.
Well, there's a fabulous French expression, since this is the French twist, but which is "la forme c'est du fond," which is format is content.
Yeah, I think that's I think in insights we could stand to learn that lesson, right? Sometimes it's like, again, we can be very smart and bring a lot of incredible insight, but thinking about the form in which you share that, whether that's a video, whether that's a PowerPoint, whatever it is, and recognizing that. I think sometimes we can be dismissive and think, well, no, the message is really clear and important, but really recognizing that that's just as important, if not more so.
I think we should talk again about socializing insights. I've heard things like segmentation studies being created in terms of like podcasts and audiobooks
Yeah.
where the
Yeah. Yeah.
segments, they have a voice and everything's done through AI.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I guess that's another creative
Yeah.
solution for AI.
Yeah, I think there's something there. Second question, which is your favorite word?
Oh, this was a really hard question.
Why? Maybe that's your answer.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe I don't know why I found that very difficult. I think because it's like, well, is it the... I overthought the question, which is not the first time in life.
Clearly.
Clearly
Simple
overthought the
question. So
question.
clearly you overthought it. That's usually how it goes.
Well, because I was thinking, like, is it the word that I like the sound of? Is it the concept? And obviously, I kind of went down a rabbit hole for about an hour thinking about that. So the word that came to me was eloquence for two reasons. Because I like the fluidity of the word and the sort of elegance, if you like, of the word. So just, aesthetically, if you like, whatever the right word is, linguistically. But because also I think it's a word, it's a concept that really appeals to me, because I guess it kind of goes back to everything we talked about, which is you can be incredibly smart, you can have incredible research and data, but if you can deliver it eloquently in a way that people are like, oh, I get that, oh, it's concisely, sharply, I was like, there's something about the eloquence of language that I sort of feel like we've forgotten about. I remember reading when I was I think when I started my career in advertising planning and consulting, I read obviously Ogilvy, and then I read The Economist had like a handbook on how to write properly. I just remember that being really revealing to me of like, oh no, I mean, it's how you deliver the message, right? Back to your point, that you can deliver something incredibly clearly, concisely, and eloquently. So yeah, that's why I chose eloquence.
Yeah.
God knows, there could be 100 other words that I should have chosen,
but I think it's a really good one, and it brings me back to I used to write research reports, but also half of the research was public, so like we could write scientific articles. Back in the day, like 20 years ago. And so it was interesting how my very first report, and this is to a PhD, emeritus, blah, blah, blah. The only thing, he wrote two things on the first slide. He wrote words matter. And then the other one is, and this is 20 years ago, but words matter. And the other one was what I said in French, because it was in Paris. I did my master's in Paris, which is format is content, which to this day are still two things that haunt me every time I like it's with me. And it's still to this day kind of a good reminder of the two kind of overarching conceptual sort of guidelines of a good deck for some reason.
Yeah, and it's funny. Sometimes the feedback I get from people is you were able to articulate what I was trying to say really eloquently. So maybe that, but I think you're just
bragging now, Nick.
Yeah, I know. That was definitely a humble brag.
I told you about my first report and how shit it was.
And then I was like, let me tell you how eloquent people think that I am, just to be able to stick the knife in on that one. No, but I think I guess we talked about this before, but I think there is pride to be had in being able to articulate things really clearly. But again, particularly in a big organization, and whether you're on the agency side working with clients or working in a big organization, the ability to eloquently, articulately explain something, again, that's sort of an under-leveraged, under-respected skill, because actually at the end of the day, that's 90% of what matters. I mean, yes, hopefully you have a really good story to tell, you have a really good content, but exactly as you said, the form is the content. And so many times I've seen incredible insights leaders lose their way in presenting something because they get lost in the detail. They can't articulate it in a way that's eloquent enough that a CEO who has 10 seconds to take your message can absorb. And it's just that's frustrating, right, for them and for us.
You can't figure out what you're trying to say as you're saying it.
Yeah.
Down, let it percolate. That's what we used to say, the witch's brew. That's where the art comes in, right. In art form. I always say though that if you're very eloquent, you make it look really easy. And
it's not always easy.
No, it's not. If it looks easy, it's because there's like 10,000 hours behind it.
Right,
Some
right,
people
exactly.
forget that, which is also kind of interesting.
Yeah, it does. It does take some time, but it's sometimes, sometimes people have said to me, like, what do you think about something? And I said, actually, I just need a few minutes to think
Yeah.
about how I'm going to respond to it. Because as you say, just words matter. And sometimes it's okay to just take a step back and go, I'm just going to think for a minute before I step into this. And so I come with something that, is a little bit more thought through, a little bit more
But
adequate.
already, you don't need, I think the fact that you have the reflex of saying, give me 2 minutes, I
Mm-hmm.
think just that means that you make a point to do it. And I think it's very respectful of the other person's time. And
Yeah.
I think there's something really generous and nice about that. If you ask
Right,
me.
and sometimes I say, I've tried to coach when I've done mentoring. I've tried to coach people to say, actually, there's nothing weak in saying, I don't know the answer to that question right now, or let me think about how to respond to that. Because
Mhm.
actually, you're just being, rather than knee jerking into it, you can say it confidently, and you can say it in a way that gives the
Yeah.
person confidence that you'll do something, think about it.
Mhm.
But it isn't a sign of weakness. It's just a sign of thoughtfulness, right? Like, I'm not going to give you a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
I want to think about how to respond to that in the right way.
And I think that's the power of also acknowledging receipt. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lost art for some reason. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm sounding old now, but
Yeah.
there's something about just email. Like I tend to email on it. We'll get
Yes.
back to you this afternoon
Right.
because sometimes I need time to just think about it, to write it down, to be smart about it because it might be copied, it might go somewhere else. You never know. So to be really helpful, but I think acknowledging receipt gives you
The
that
permission.
time without saying,
Yes.
wait, I don't know the answer. I think there's
Yes.
also that. There's ways of actually going about it.
No,
Um,
you're absolutely right. And I
yeah.
think that's a really good example. And again, it goes back to knowing your stakeholder or who you're dealing with, right? Which is that if you've got somebody, particularly a lot of my stakeholders are commercial, type A's, action oriented, but to be able to say, okay, got it, I'm on it, or I'll get back to you tomorrow or tonight or whenever it is, it gives you the permission while respecting the fact that there's somebody who is impatient, action oriented, and they want an answer. So
Mhm.
you're trying to get the right balance to say, yes, I'll get to it, but I need the time to be able to think about how to
Yeah.
formulate the response to this to give you the best answer.
And if you're on the receiving end of the on it, then you're like, done, scratch it off my list.
Exactly.
Otherwise, if you don't get a knowledge receipt, you can't scratch it off your list. You don't,
That's it.
responded to.
Yeah.
I think it's also that.
Exactly. And I see it myself, right? When whether it's with a partner or just in my personal life, and if I ask, a contractor for something, they go, great, I got it, I'll come back to you tomorrow. Then I can scratch it off my mental
Yeah.
list. I mean, I might have to chase them for it, but at least I scratched it off my list of this is something
Yeah,
that's
then you can
overhead
add
for
it in
me.
a different way with different words the next day.
Yes.
It's a different
Sure. Follow up.
different list. Turn the page and paper looks good. Okay, so least favorite word, Nick.
So this one was easier. So it's two corporate phrases that I really hate. So one is alignment. I don't hate the concept of alignment. I just hate how it shows up in many corporate organizations.
Okay.
Just because it assumes that people will all agree with something, and the reality is they won't. I mean, again, back to the point, you want it to be a team sport. You want everyone to be engaged, but you also need to respect that people have different rules and there are different decision rights. Sometimes like I work in a global team, sometimes the global team has decision rights, the local teams are informed, sometimes it's vice versa. But alignment sort of forces that everybody has to be on the same page and everybody has to agree, or at least that's sort of how it shows up in a lot of corporate organizations, and it just wastes a lot of time, and I'm just not sure it's the best way to operate.
Isn't it slightly contradictory to specialization on the team as well? Because they will, if you're
Yes.
a team of specialists, they come at it from a different perspective, a different piece of, I don't know.
It was interesting when I was at Pepsi, we did a lot of work on like, again, agile ways of working, and one of the things that it sort of revealed is just how many meetings are broken in terms of the way that they're set up, in terms of what you're asking people. And again, we just did some really good work with with my Europe team on this, on rapid decision making, I said alignment decision making. But again, I think what's good about that is it goes back to what you said before. If you just say and agree as a team, or set out as a team, person X, Y, and Z is the decision maker. Your role is to, in this case, your role is to inform, or your role is to consult, or whatever the role is. But just being really clear, then as long as they're not always in that role, sometimes they'll be in a decision-making role, sometimes they'll be an inform role. But just being really honest and straightforward and saying, like, this is the role that I need you to play in this. Like, I want you to be the technical expert versus the decision maker.
Yeah.
Then actually it's just being very respectful of people. Because actually the worst thing that I see happens in many organizations is, not just in, the organizations I've worked in, is you waste all this time, you ask everyone for their opinion, but actually ultimately you can't absorb or take everybody's opinion because it's going to be contradictory, and then people are annoyed that you didn't listen to them, and then who do you listen to? You just listen to the most senior. It creates all of this unnecessary angst and frustration and circular argumentation, which honestly you can resolve by just goes back to a clear brief. This is the job to be done. Here's the decisions, right? Here's what role I need everyone to play. But somehow, I feel like in a lot of organizations, we sort of shy away from that because it doesn't feel inclusive. But actually, to me, it actually can be the opposite of that. It can be incredibly inclusive because it's very respectful. And so I think that's why I just hate. I don't hate the word. I just hate the thing that comes with it.
Yeah, and how it's used, maybe. And what's the second one, if I may ask?
The second one was resilience, which is interesting because, again, it's more often how I feel it's used than the concept. Because obviously the concept itself, I get and I like, and I think there's a in its most authentic version. It's good because ultimately you need to be resilient, you need to be flexible. I feel like, though, there's something about when it's often used in organizations, again, not just necessarily in mine or just, I feel it's often used as a sort of suck it up because there's a lot of stuff coming and you just need to be resilient. It feels like it's almost being used, like it's what is a really good concept is sort of used against people, if you like. There's something... Again, it's not that the word resilient is bad. It's just I feel like often it's used to excuse the fact that we're going to ask a lot of people, and they almost like to sort of say, well, if you don't respond to this change, or then you're not resilient, as opposed to saying, well, actually, maybe if you don't respond well to say a change management program or a new structure, maybe we haven't structured it properly, we haven't thought carefully enough about how to manage it. So it's just the way it sort of gets thrown out as you'll need to be resilient, as opposed to actually, how do we help you be resilient? How do we help you respond to whatever change is coming, as opposed to just, Isabelle, be resilient. It's like, okay.
And I feel it's right up there with grit for me, where
it's
always used as you're not resilient, you don't have grit. They don't have grit. The young people don't have grit. Like, I feel it's always used in the negative way. Like, it's not you're resilient, you have grit. It's like you do not have any. And it comes from someone who's older than you.
Right, or just, but you're right. It's sort of, feels, it's often used as you must be resilient or you are not resilient, as opposed to celebrating resilience that you see in the organization and preparing organizations for resilience.
And I feel like, and maybe it's because if it's done properly and well strategized, rolled out, whatever it might be, the action verb, like fill in the blank, no one needs to be resilient.
Maybe maybe that's the ask. And I think
I don't know.
It's I think actually, just as we talked about it, I think what my issue is with it is it sort of then puts the onus on you as the individual but you must be resilient. You must find your way to be resilient. As opposed to what I think we need to create resilient organizations that can respond to change. But then I have responsibility for that as an individual, but then our organizations have responsibility to prepare us for that as well. So that's just and again, this is not a criticism of my current employer, my prior employer. It's the way it gets thrown out across the corporate world as a sort of, as you say, it's like a badge of shame if you're not responding well to change.
Yeah. And it's pushed on someone versus being a
Yes.
thing. Yeah. Okay. We're way over. I'm
I
sure
know, I
Christoph
know.
is texting and whatnot. This is what
Everyone,
happens on
everyone
Friday
switched off. This is
afternoon.
basically just you and me talking to each other by now. I'm pretty
I
sure.
know. And I think that's lovely. And I could go on and on. Do come back. And I do have one last question, which is my
Yes.
favorite one. And then we must promise to do this again because I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
there's
I would love
more
to.
stuff.
I'd love to.
Yeah, I think that was okay. So the last question, my favorite one, which is what is the best thing a mentor has told you that still to this day resonates with you and sort of guides you?
Yeah, so this one was really easy because it's sort of
Mm.
burned in my memory. I was probably 25, 26, and I had a really great mentor. I was in a small consulting company, had a really great mentor, and we did the Strengths Finders
Oh
book,
yes, the
which
2.0 or whatever. Yeah.
yeah,
With the
whichever,
yeah, I did it
which
too. Yeah.
I loved, and it was the first time in my entire life. It was the first time that somebody had opened my mind to the idea that actually, yes, there are things the things you're not good at, and as long as you're accepting and you're humble about those, but you don't have to fix them all because you probably can't fix them all. Some of them are, some of them are who you are. Some of them you may be things you'd never be good at. But
Mm-hmm.
actually, and I feel like we're repeating our story from before, but actually what you do is you have superpowers. You have things you're incredibly strong at, you're innately strong at.
Mm-hmm.
So don't try and fix everything. Surround yourself with people. Be accepting, be humble about your weaknesses.
Yeah.
Surround yourself with people who can compensate for your weaknesses, but lean into your strengths and be the best person in the world at the things that innately you are brilliant at. And to me, that was honestly, it feels like it was probably one of the biggest turning points, right, in my
Mm-hmm.
personal development, because it was the first time anybody, from my family, from my education, had explained that to me. And that is, it's almost like the 180 of how you're taught at school, in most, professional development. It's the opposite. It's like, okay, you're good at these things, but let me tell you all the things you're crap at and all the things that you need to get better at.
Mm-hmm.
And this was not a complete opposite of that, but it was a completely different way of thinking about it. And it's probably been the one piece of advice I've given to everybody I've ever mentored, everybody I've ever worked with is, yes, let's look at where your opportunities are, but let's not spend all of our time diagnosing your development areas and not talking about what your strengths are and how we can make you super, super strong, how we can unleash your superpower.
Yeah. I don't know if we had the same mentor, but it echoes my thing. It's not rooted in Strength Finder. It's rooted in me showing up in Italy at the age of 22 and going to debrief a whole bunch of Italian men that are senior leaders, senior leadership committee. And I'm in Milan and I froze before I opened the door. And my mentor was behind me and he knows who he is and still to this day. And I said, I can't do it. I'm like, they've been at this for longer than I've been breeding on this planet. And he goes, you can bring something and are bringing something that they cannot do.
Right.
And so do that.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's a great example.
And so he said, your number one strength. So it echoes what you said. Your number one strength should be knowing your weaknesses. Be proud, say it, and you can still improve. But make sure your strengths are so nourished and so amazing that they outshine your weaknesses.
That is a really amazing example, and it's funny. I'm mentoring somebody at the moment, somebody I used to work with, who we had this not exactly the same situation, but exact kind of conversation, where she said to me, I'm sitting in a meeting with a lot of salespeople, commercial people, and they know all of this stuff about, the go-to-market structures, our price pack architecture, and she's like, I don't know any of that, and I feel like I can't say anything because I'll look stupid. And I was like, okay, but what do they know about the consumer? What do they know about what the problem is we're trying to solve for? And she was like, well, nothing. That's the problem. We're not talking about that. And I said, well, that is your superpower. Like, yes, you got to remember they have weaknesses too, and you can compensate for their weaknesses. So I just love that example. And I think there's so many people, particularly in our industry, who are thoughtful and reflective and introspective, and sort of spend too much time thinking about what they don't know about, as opposed to actually what is their incredible superpower.
Yeah.
an insight that they can bring to the table and is just as respected. It's just different. It's just different from the other people who are there.
Exactly. Have you done the Strength Finder test now, like later in life?
I did it again. Probably.
Was it the same?
It was the same. Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't done it in a while, so maybe that is the summer
Maybe
test
you and
for
I
me.
can both do it and compare and contrast and have a chat.
Yeah, I would like that. We can come back for a second. We can go back for a second podcast and do that.
Yeah, I think that would be funny.
We'll do it live on air. How's that? We'll do sort of a surprise reveal. I like it.
Oh, we could do that. I think that'd be great. But there's been a lot of people actually listening. We're not just on our own, but there's been people on the chat and whatnot. So I think we have to promise each other that we're doing this again. And
sounds awesome.
Yeah, that was lovely. Thank you so much. So insightful, so amazing, and so lovely. It's just a vibe, and we have so many things in common. Awesome.
I know. This has been so much fun. We will definitely do this again. So
yeah,
I'm gonna dig out my Strength Finders book. I think I still have it actually downstairs in my
I'm sure I have it somewhere. It probably is curled up somewhere, but yeah, I have to find it. But yeah, we'll be in touch. And
it's
then
been a lot of fun. Thanks for inviting me along, Isabelle. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you. How amazing. Okay, people, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for staying an extra half hour with us. It is Friday afternoon for us, so we were just sitting there chit-chatting. Thanks again for tuning in and for listening, and we'll be with you next week for episode 11, so keep an eye out. Do sign up, do follow so that you don't miss it. Thank you, and that's another episode of Insightful Inspiration.